Markham. With Fantasy and Friends. This is our fifth IDP panel, I believe, so it's good to see this many faces. Hopefully we'll have plenty of answers for you.
Yeah, Iggy, I'm with Fantasy Alarm. Third or fourth year on the panel. IDP the panel for a decade now. I'm here going to John.
John Norton, I'm a football guy. First time I've been on the panel. That's been a great job.
Gary Davenport, godfather of IDP. I work wherever we can.
I started Fantasy and Friends back in 2017 and we've always been covering IDP. Clearly have a passion for it, and obviously we're doing this conference that we're going to do. So we're looking forward to giving some things and ends, what the big wave is, and answer some of your questions.
All right, so in the audience, how many of you play currently IDP?
That's what I like to see.
So, what are some common misconceptions about IDP?
I feel like there's a lot of people are hesitant to get in it. It's in the most common answer is difficult. I don't know defensive players. And that doesn't matter because you're not going to know like your flex players or you're not into college football, you don't know the rookies right now. So I feel like that's a common misconception in the sport that there's not relative wealth. I was just checking out a roster from somebody and they're like, well, there's no point in having them. I'm just going to draft them at the very end. I don't think that's true either, you know. You have the right setup with your scoring or the roster setups, and you're going to have relative wealth. So I think those are the biggest misconceptions about IDP. And then if I hear anybody say it's not fun, I'm like, you're not cheating on your team. It's a big six. Alright? Don't do that at all. Because IDP is fun.
All right, Nate, so playing IDP, how do you feel that it changes the fantasy experience for you?
After 25 plus years of playing fantasy football in general, typically redraft the kind of the same. I like to spice it up. We have to do something different. People get into dynasty leagues. We do different rule changes, whatever the case may be. So IDP was that introduction to kind of spice it up a little bit. And then what I found is by doing the research, deep diving, following those players, I learned schematic changes for defense and how that can actually help the offensive side of the ball. And just like you said, there's nothing better, no matter what anybody says. Watching the running back busted in for a yard for you to win your fantasy league does not pale in comparison to watching your outside linebacker or your defensive end sack the quarterback to win like that. Because it's just something. It's nice to have a change, and I think that's what I implore everybody to do is give it a shot and see if you can enjoy both sides of the football. Go to on Sundays, Thursdays, Mondays.
All right, Jorge. Now, every platform has different advantages and disadvantages when it comes to IDP. What are some of your favorite platforms to play IDP now?
Sure, so all of us assuming are familiar with the Silver app. So a lot of us play on that. So they have IDP in 3 position designations for linebackers, defensive backs. And then we get to my fantasy league where you have 5 designations where you can actually do defensive tackles, defensive ends, quarterbacks. And break down these 3 designations into more positions. ESPN just did a huge remodel of their app where you can do the exact same thing. NFL, going back to them for a second, really cool because you can customize your scoring per position. So that gives you another layer of creativity you can bring to your IDP leagues. Then platforms like Yahoo, Fantrax, NFL Fantasy, Flickr, have all incorporated IDP into their products. So everyone has, for sleeper, for example, the 3-position designation league. That is probably the best way to ease your way into IDP. And then, taking it a step further, you go into the platforms that offer the 5-position designations. And then going back to NFL, the fact that you can customize per position really gives you that hands-on aspect of IDP. Like we were talking about, there is no uniform scoring settings for IDP, which is great because it's like, I can make my league how I want it to, and I have that control. And we as a league get to vote on what is good in terms of the value per points per play, and how that aligns with the offensive scoring if we have dual IDP and offensive players in there.
All right. So when you were setting up, we're talking about MFL, all the options that you have. What is the ideal roster construction? Like, how many should you start at each of the different positions?
It depends on how deep you want to get. I always think that a good IDP kind of starter kit is you start maybe a couple defensive linemen, 2-3 linebackers, a couple defensive backs, and a flex spot or two. That way you're not overwhelmed. It's not, 11 defensive starters and you have to start a quarterback and you have to start a defensive tackle. It's just madness. But the defensive players matter. Whereas if you just go with like one defensive back, one defensive lineman, one linebacker, it's essentially like team defense. You're just waiting until the end of the draft and grabbing it. So if you go jump in, jump in. And the more defensive starters you start, the more you'll enjoy it.
That's true. Are there any questions? If you have any questions, you can raise your hand at any time. So we're talking about scoring and how different it is, right? There's balance, there's tackle heavy, right? So when it comes to roster construction, how do you approach the different strategies?
So it's like every other thing. The first thing you got to do is figure out what your scoring systems think. And you go in there, you read your rules, you decide, okay, if it's a tackle heavy league, it's going to change the way you rank the players. It's going to change the way you draft. Same thing. It's going to take more chances on guys for big play league because big play league is less consistent. So it will change the values of the players per position. The ultimate way to do it, in my opinion, is to try to make it balanced. We want to make sure that all the positions have good value. We want to make sure that if you're backing out defensive tackles and defensive ends, your defensive tackles aren't going to make as many plays, tackles, and so forth as linebackers. So they need to get that value. Stats they put up. Sacks might be a little bit more, tackles definitely be a little bit more, and so forth. So it's very important that you balance it, not only among the defensive players, but that you balance it with your offensive. I like to have my setup, my big setup. My offense they have a very slight advantage in the number of points that they score, but the defensive guys are at 45 to 49%. And that's just a matter of how deep we're going to get into it. We'll start 11 different players, and we'll start Gary mentioned some of the different scenarios as far as setting up the numbers of players per possession. I think offensive starters, maybe defensive starters. If we get a little more involved, we've got the 11 defensive starters and break out your defensive backs to safeties and corners, your defensive line to the tackles and ends, and then you maybe have a couple of flex guys on the offensive side. So you've got nine offensive starters and a kicker, and 11 defensive players give you 20 plus starters.
Good answer.
That's that thing you take at the end of the draft. The draft's over, to do that.
So we all love IDP only drafts, right? It means Gary Van Dyke calls it dirty O, right? Nobody's talking about the offense. But one of the toughest parts I think about drafting a mix is who breaks that seal, right? When should you, in a normal draft, start your IDP players?
It all goes back to scoring. But I like to, for us that did the Scott Fish Bowl, I went and got Travis Hunter in the first round strictly because of his bonuses. So if the value's there, we saw one yesterday in the first round at the tail end, John. So it all depends on your scoring. So hopefully your commissioners kind of broke it down. In a standard kind of scoring league, I'll typically go like the fourth round. I'm still old school. I love my running backs. I want to get those guys. If it's a super flex, I'm probably going to get a quarterback in the top couple rounds. But generally speaking, maybe the fourth round, because I want TJ Watt, I want Max Crosby, I want Caden Ellis. I want these guys that I can plug and play, and I don't have to worry about them at that position for the rest of the season. So that's kind of my take on it. I'd say fourth round, fifth round, and standard scoring. First round, if you have a good commissioner, you get points on it.
All right, Steve. So Do you have a difference in how you approach an IDP redraft versus an IDP dynasty?
I do. You guys want to hear a magic trick? In Dynasty, I played a lot different. In Dynasty, I'm looking at analytics, I'm looking at your size, speed of the player, I'm looking at age. You always hear in offense, age goes. People don't think to stash players. So I'm going to give it to you right now. What I do, this is my strategy. Defensive ends, 25 to 28. They're still good and plenty to about 30. They're going to get off them at 33. That's when the crash is. Defensive tackles, you like that old man strength, right? 26 years old, this is where they peak. 26 to 30. Cliff starts to happen a little bit older in your 30s, right? Defensive backs, you can play those guys, get drafted all the way down. You can play those guys long, 22 to 31. And the last one, we all like linebackers, right? Generally linebackers, it takes them a minute to figure out the NFL, but that 24 to 28 sweet spot, that's when they start to peak and they start to go, and then they fade off in their 30s. Of course, we have the Bobby Wagners, of course, we got guys like that are on the ground. That's how my strategy is. When I have a dynasty team, I try to make it look pretty, I try to tag it in. Redraft's the opposite. Redraft, I'll take that old 3-down linebacker, I'll take the late drafts, and show you 4 leagues. Best part of all, they're cheap and not free. Those are two separate strategies with two separate drafts, so that's how I approach it.
All right. So when it comes to the different scoring, how do you have a favorite player for the time?
So I guess before going into that, let me break it down a little bit. Primarily in IDP, you kind of focus on 3 overarching different styles. The tackle heavy, which is probably I don't want to say the most popular, because I don't think popular as, but it's correlation. More tackles, more points, you can follow that. There's the big play league, which is, it systematically benefits players that have the splash plays, sacks, interceptions, etc. And then there's the balance, which takes a mix of both. Play however you want, I don't care. Whichever one it is, as long as you don't advance, you will cater your specific scoring to that. So that was my preamble into then going into a tackle heavy league. I personally, for this series of questions, I'm going to focus on defensive backs because nobody else wants to, I'm sure. They're boring. Gary, they hate them because they think you can push them all to the very end, but there's some premium that will rise to the top. One of my favorites, and finally with this full complement of starts, is Nick Cross. Now, I know there's a new defensive coordinator in Indiana. Wow. In Indianapolis, sorry. First time. But I still believe that his core coverage skills will lend to a more tackle-heavy approach. So, quick and short, Nick Cross for myself in tackle-heavy leagues.
Yeah, I'm really all about Caden Ellis this year. I like what they did with Ulbrich, bringing him over. They put players around him so he can kind of be focused on everything funnelling in the middle of that defense. NFC South, so I think there's a lot of potential for tackles there for Caden Ellis. And he's been, he had 150 last year, so if you're looking for a heavy tackle league, 150 to 150 tackles, right? So, and I just want to reemphasize what Nate said. Tackles are to IDPs what yards are to offensive players, essentially. So that's the correlation.
So I get to be the one that picked the defensive player in the first round of the Kings Classic draft yesterday. So 2 years ago, I think we had 6 go in the first round. Last year we had 4 again. This year I was the only one that stepped up and took one. The guy that I took was Ira Franklin. I like to go with guys that I know are going to be dependable. They're going to make those tackles and maybe add a few splash plays along the way. You could go with the Jets middle linebacker who made over 100 so many tackles, but he had virtually no splash plays. Well, the splash plays are a little extra addition. Even if you're in a tackle-heavy league, you're going to get a few extra points for the splash play contribution as well. But I want that guy that's going to give me a steady, constant score every week that I can count on. I'm never going to get a 0. I'm going to get no stinkers from that guy. So Ira Franklin was the number 1 guy in the tackle-heavy.
I don't know how I feel about you besmirching the good name of J.D. Sherwood, but I'm gonna let that slide. I'm gonna let that slide. TJ Edwards, Chicago Bears, is a guy who will just go out and get you tackles year after year after he's perennially undervalued. I know they're talking about giving Tremaine Edmonds the green dot in Chicago and flipping their roles. It doesn't matter. They're both going to be 3-down guys, and you can get Edwards probably LB 10 to 12 range, and that's a lot closer to his 4 than his C. If you want to like attack an edge rusher early, you want to get a TJ Watt or Miles Garrett, you can circle back and get Edwards over LB1, and you'll be set.
So something that Gary was alluding to there, the 3-down rule. So for a tackle-heavy first position when we're drafting, I want to make sure that this person is going to be on the field for 3 downs. I don't want them coming off the field on 3rd down because that's less time they're on the field. If they do, that's less time they're getting the fantasy points. So somebody who really came out of the shell last year, and I see an Eagles fan in the crowd here, Zach Vaughn, linebacker. Not only was he great at tackling, and he was graded by PFF as one of the best overall linebackers. He plays well in coverage, and that's how you stay on the field in 3rd down. You have to play well in coverage. You got a few interceptions. And so he definitely brings you that extra splash that John was talking about a second ago to your IDP. So how goes that going?
I just want to reiterate on the players get down this thing. I'll give you a quick story since I'm doing that. There's one player, tackle heavy, big play. There's one player to rule them all, and that's Kane Ellis. I just heard AD say Kane Ellis. He's pretty cheap. You can get him in leagues. Big play scoring. It was LB3. Play scoring. He was only behind Zach Vaughn. He was only behind guys like Franklin. Tackle heavy, he's even better. He's an LB2. So what Iggy just said, that's a good player, Kane Ellis. So I'll throw some bonuses at you. Guys like Deion Henry. Deion Henry's a tackle heavy. He's a top 10. You look at big play, he's top 20. So to JJ's point, context does matter. You've got to know what picture you're in. Big play, I'm switching gears. I'm going towards Frankie Louvu. Frankie Louvu was the 2nd most rushed linebacker in the league last year, next to Mike Parsons. So your context matters. Players will shift based on the balance, but when you answer Kane Ellis everywhere, Louvu, big play, heavy down.
Well, the Eagles fan will know Louvu tried to make a couple big plays, and they almost aborted a touchdown. All right, so let's just shift to big play. Thank you.
So for me, when I think about big play, I want to take advantage of those extra points for the sacks. Interceptions are so hard to come by because one of the things that is really odd about IDP, which I'll say, is just because you're let's say for example, the best defensive back in the NFL, does not make you the best defensive back for IDP. Why? Because you think the quarterback is going to be targeting Sauce Gardner, for example, when you're just early and often? No, he doesn't want to get picked off, right? Now, the guy across the field from Sauce Gardner, that's where your value is going to lie. So therefore, because of that, uncertainty of defensive back, I like to go and get some of the premier edge rushers like Danielle Hunter, Will Anderson, Max Crosby, Nick Benito had a great year last year for Denver. Again, those 3-down edge rushers really slash defensive linemen. That's what
Since Steve mentioned Zach Vaughn, I'll go with a reverse Zach Vaughn, because Zach Vaughn played edge rusher in New Orleans, and then he went to Philadelphia and blossomed as an all-ball linebacker. Andrew Van Ginkel started as an all-ball linebacker in Miami, and then switched to an edge rusher 2 years ago because they had a ton of injuries, and kind of blossomed. And then last year in Minnesota, he just went completely crazy, and was the top defensive lineman in a lot of scoring systems. I don't know that he's going to quite reach those heights this year, but he certainly seemed it. And in big play scoring, yeah, you're chasing sacks and interceptions. You want to shoot for upside. And it's going to cost you a little consistency, but again, when you get the big weeks, you can, if you're in a big play league and an edge rusher goes out there and gets you 2.5 sacks, you're looking at like a 45-point fantasy score. And those are good.
All right, so I'm going to go to the defensive backs on this and go with Brian Branch from the Lions. This is a guy that when he came into the league, they tried to put him at the corner and the slot, whatever. Last year they decided to go ahead and move him into the strong safety position, and he absolutely blew up. The guy makes tackle numbers. There's nothing bad about his game. If you're a tackle heavy league, it's good for you. If you're in a big play-based league, he's even better, because he's going to make a good number of interceptions, he's going to get in on a handful of sacks, he's going to force fumbles. The guy's just everywhere, does everything for you. So I think if you're in the big play base league, I think Brian Branch is probably one of the defensive back on the board at the very least.
Great advice, John. I just want to reiterate what I said. I really believe in the Texans this year. They're playing a rookie quarterback, a rookie head coach, and whatever we want to call AR and Daniel Jones. So I think there's a lot of potential for Will Anderson, Danielle Hunter to come in with D'Amico Ryan's defense and just wreak havoc on that division. But I will say, football has a closer. I know there's some MLB fans in here. Trey Hendrickson's job is to close games. That's all he does, right? He led the league in sacks because it's late. The Eagles can't get ahead and stay ahead, so they need somebody to go in there and make that big play in this drive. And that's what Hendrickson does. So it's kind of an easy one to go to because he led the league in sacks. But 17 and a half, there's a lot of consistency there. But he's only had 48 tackles last year, 43 the year before. So he's heavily reliant on his sack, but that's his job. He is the closer for that team. And we don't really talk about that, but that's some people's skill set. Like saving my energy, I'm gonna close this game out. And that's what Henderson's doing.
I'm just going to hold the mic until we can stop doing all this Philadelphia Eagles pandering. I'm going to cut it off real quick, and then we can. I'm not okay. I need a moment. I'm sick of this. I can't stand it. I don't even want to give information right now. In fact, actually, you guys fend for yourself. I wish you the best. Actually, that's not true. But I do want to say that one thing I do every year, and this is I seem to pick a player, and I don't go into too many depth alternate plays, which is not helpful for you all, but I will reaffirm exactly what John said, and that I have Brian Branch. I had him. I don't think we can say his name enough in all formats. And exactly, I'll add one of the reasons is exactly what he was saying about the player, and you can help identify your own specific player that you may find is a person who's going to be beneficial in that scoring by identifying a cornerback or a defensive back safety that plays more box snaps or has high pass rush totals. And then you figure that with the ball hawking ability, you combine pass rush skill set, good tackling, as well as the ball hawk ability, and you can see that developing into why a big play makes sense for him. And I'll pivot to the all around, the what do we call that? The balance. And balance is very similar to big play, especially at the defensive back, because at that one position, you are looking for someone who's going to have just good football IQ and being put into a position that they can be successful. And that person's a person who I've loved for years, and Kyle Hamilton. I think he's the best overall defensive back in football. Sorry, every other team that I'm slandering right now, but at this point I don't care. I've taken enough. But Kyle Hamilton, now with the addition of Malachi Starks, who maybe someone will talk about as a rookie, I think that added piece allows them to use Kyle Hamilton in that chess piece role, put him exactly where he needs to be, all health considered and all. But yeah, so defensive back for the win. Sorry, Gary.
No, I can just get defensive back, so I'm not going to make sure. Hey, you don't just come draft early because I'm not young. He hates
All right, Gary. I'll stop talking about defensive backs for you. So on the offensive side, we know you have to approach different positions differently when it comes to the draft. Wide receivers, we'll draft those forever. Running backs, zero guy, whatever. It's a much shallower field. How does that carry over to IDP? What positions is there a scarcity? If you don't get one of the top guys, might as well apply.
I would say now, with the advent of true position, where a lot of 3-4 outside linebackers are now classified as defensive linemen, which they should be. TJ Watt has the same job as Myles Garrett, just because he plays in a slightly different alignment. He's an edge rusher. Edge rusher too. Linebacker is the shallowest position. So you need to be aggressive early in most IDP leagues, making sure you get those every down guys. Those guys that are going to play 85, 90+% snap share, because that pool is going to thin out fairly quickly. Defensive lineman, again, with true position, it's a little bit deeper, so you can wait a little bit. And defensive back has long been the deepest, most unpredictable position in IDP. So yes, fade defensive backs, wait, and wait, and then wait to make a sandwich, take a nap, binge watch like 2 seasons of Game of Thrones, and then take a sandwich. How you like the nap?
All right, boys, calm down. Does anybody in the audience have a question? Mr. Burns.
So based on that, would you consider a safety who they bring up, based on whatever defense they will be, consider a safety who they bring up in the box a lot, almost as a high value linebacker or lower value linebacker, just because if you're going up against a team that plays 12-man personnel and is running all the time, and you know the safety's going to be in on 75%.
Yes, you're going to bump those box safeties. And it used to be pretty much every team had a deep safety and strong safety, free safety and strong safety. Now we're seeing more and more where teams will go almost just left safety, right safety. They want 2 safeties who are versatile enough that they can play both roles. So yes, if you can get a guy that you know is going to be up by the line of scrimmage a lot, yes, that defensive back like Ryan Bridge, he's going to bump way up the list.
Question, new faces, new places, like Robert Spillane went from the Raiders over to New England, and then say Jermaine Pratt went over from the Bengals and signed with the Raiders. Where did we think that they were top 10 IDP linebackers last year? Do you think they're going to sustain those type of numbers?
So this was a conversation that Gary and I had way back early on, after the Spillane first went over, that I would say that it's definitely not going to help his IDP value going to New England. It's just a matter of how much it's going to hurt it. New England has been notorious for not playing any linebacker every down. You know, they'll have a guy that'll play 100% 2 games in a row, and they'll play 60% the next week. And unfortunately, they don't put out any information to let us know when they're going to do that, so it shoots us in the foot. But I think Spillane is one of those guys, the day he got off the bus in New England, he was their best pass defending linebacker. And I really think that this might be the year that changes, that they wind up leaving him on the field full time. I still think he's going to be a pretty darn good linebacker for us. I don't know that I would hold him with the standards that was put up last year, but I think he'll still be at the very least a good second starter for us. Jermaine Pratt. So here's the situation with Jermaine Pratt. I personally think he's probably going to be their lead tackler and their best linebacker. But right now they've got Landon Roberts is wearing the green dot, which means he'll be on the field full time. Well, if they continue with what they have in the past, they don't play 2 full-time linebackers. Divine Diablo only played about 65% of the snaps last year. So if Pratt gets stuck in that lesser role, it's definitely going to impact his value quite a bit. I think he is their best linebacker. I think eventually, and because it's Landon Roberts, I don't believe Landon Roberts will be a full-time linebacker in the NFL. He's a very good run defender. Every place that he's been has tried to have him in that 4-down role or 3-down role for a little while, then they've moved him back into a lesser role. And I think eventually the Raiders are going to see that same scenario and make that change. How soon that happens, or if for sure that happens, I don't know. So I would definitely downgrade Pratt on draft day. If you can get him at a decent price, I think he's a good deal.
And then Jeremy Chin as well, going over there as well. And I think it's going to be, to answer your question, they've released their rookie linebackers. So I thought they had faith in Pratt. I think they're going to be bringing Chin down into the box a lot. You know, he's a hybrid safety, and I think that's another example to piggyback off of your question, like with Chin or Metellus or something like that. You're going to see the hybrid safety more because the tight end is changing so much. And then you're going to see, and then the slot wide receivers are getting better. So those safeties are becoming more and more valuable.
Who are some of your favorite guys that you expect to break out this year? Maybe like a second or third player, finally getting that opportunity to get more reps in. Who are some of your favorite guys there?
Yeah, I'll do it. So, Tigers Knight. I like that. I kind of wrote something up for you here with Tigers Knight. He didn't get a lot of play up until like week 10 last year. So if you look at box snaps, it's kind of like a lazy, boring way to play because there's a lot of analytics and a lot of snap count, a lot of data to put in IDP. If you look at Tigers Knight, I mean, we only had 88 tackles this year. If you look at week 10 onward, he only put like very few little snaps. But week 10 onward is going to crank up to 75 snaps. So once he got to that point, that 88 times I just mentioned, 65 happened at the end of the year. So he was blowing it up. So that's the guy I'm targeting. Now I know you're thinking, oh, he's going to be doing his own films. There's weeks. Go back and look at the weeks that he beat Ernest Jones. There's weeks that he had top 5 plays. So that's the guy I'm sneakily taking my drafts. It's a big one. There's tons of them we can talk about. That's Tyrese Knight's.
So, sorry, Nate, but I'm going to stick with the Eagles theme right here. Their breakout. Nolan Smith, edge rusher, former first-round pick. From week 11 through the Super Bowl, 8 sacks out of 39 total pressures. Meaning, what do I mean by pressures? I mean being able to apply pressure to the quarterback in the air to either make a sack or quarterback hit. That is crazy efficient. And I think they were just waiting for the right time to move some pieces. Josh Sweat is now with the Arizona Cardinals, so now he's going to be stepping into a full-time role. Now, one person, brought up the concern that, if he's the best edge rusher and the other guy on the other side is not going to command a lot of attention, does that mean Nolan's going to face a lot of double teams? Is he going to be in a position where he's not going to be able to take advantage of his starting opportunity? You look last year, Jalen Hunt, who also down the stretch played really well, is going to be sliding into that opposite edge rusher role there for the Philadelphia Eagles. So Nolan Smith is really high in my rankings. I really buy into both in Dynasty and in redraft. I think he has potential DL2 upside. So Nolan Smith definitely.
I guess we're running the table. I'll go rookie, Carson Schwarzenegger in Cleveland. First pick in the second round. The Browns are going to be the Browns, so it's going to be. I say that as a 40-year Browns fan. It's just pain and misery and 3 hours of suck every Sunday afternoon. But that defense is going to be on the field a lot, and he is going to make a ton of tackles. Already wearing the green helmet.
I'm going to go with Ezra Cooper from the Packers. This is a guy that last year, he only played a little less than 600 snaps, a little less than 50% of the snaps. And if you look at his per snap production, he would have been the #1 linebacker and very possibly the #1 defensive player had he played full time and kept that same per snap value. This year he's going to be in the full-time role. We're seeing a lot of teams these days that are having their linebackers, rookie linebackers, have a part-time role at first year and then move them up in the second year. I think he earned that job, which I think we've already put him in the full-time role. He's going to be on the field for upwards of 1,000, maybe even over 1,000 snaps this year. And I will not be at all shocked if he's not the #1 linebacker at the end of the season.
Making me happy, John. Speaking to my heart there. I wasn't me, unfortunately. I like Quiddy Bay. I don't know if y'all know it, but we've been talking about Colts players. You heard Zaire Franklin, you heard Cross, DeForest Buckner, for people that really know who he is. It makes everybody's job so much easier. So I think Quiddy Bay, I'm not sure how much positive game scripts they're going to have, but he hasn't needed them. He's had 16.5 sacks over the past 2 years while missing games, and I just think there's a potential for him to come out, not be the focal point of the offensive coordinators, and come out and get double-digit sacks this year. So I like Quiddy Bay. Colts got a lot of playmakers on that.
Always have been a big fan of Quiddy Bay. And I'm a big fan of one who, my breakout is, he's growing out in my eyes. But sometimes we need validation to say, all right, was last year as a rookie a fluke, or is this going to be something we're going to continue to see in next year at Verse? And while you look at the underlying metrics of win rate, pressures, all while doing this as a rookie, if you look at the actual sack totals, it's probably one of the most, I say, misaligned factors that we all quickly glance to. You sort by sacks and you see 4.5, 4, and you think, all right, defensive player of the year, but you have to peel away the layers of that onion. And when you peel away the layers of that onion, you see deep down an incredible playmaker who's going to have the sacks. It's inevitable. I think last year we had the question of Will Anderson and Denell Hunter, and it was the same thing. If you look at just the number, the easy eye-popping sack totals, you go, maybe, but it's vindicated whenever you actually, like I said, peel apart those layers. So, great question.
Well,
Hey, AJ, first time here. Now, when you talk about the player carousel that goes around every year, I want us to talk on the coaching carousel. Is there a D coordinator that just wherever he goes produces gold for IDP? You talk about team schemes impacted, but is there a D scheme that is just that's like it's going to take that nobody, that seventh rounder, no matter its playing skill, and it's just going to be
So, the short answer is no, we're not Johnny Carson, who was a couple of magnificent, right? We're not going to predict, but there are trends. Like, there's a guy, he coached for Miami in Green Bay, his name is Anthony Cannelli. Linebacker, he stops the run. Everywhere he goes, he stops the run. So that's the guy I look for. There's certain coaches that do telling certain things. That answers your question. I did an article, I covered it. And there's 9 different coordinators that moved around this year that I think that are going to impact IDP. I'm only going to give you 2 today, just to give you a little, just to paint a story and tell you how significant that is. There's a guy named Lou Aronomo. He used to coach for the Bengals. Now he's moving on to the Colts. So those are the 2 scenarios I'll give you just to paint the picture and tell you. Remember, the Bengals were in competition. They were in competition with the Bills. They were in competition with the Chiefs. They were trying to win. They were constantly trying to win. So they built a team of defense to try to beat those elite teams. So they run a lot of nickel, a lot of dime, a lot of schemes like that. Go through fives, go through fives. What ended up happening in the last couple of years? Playing a lot of defensive backs. Made stop the pass, but they could not stop the run. So they're getting gashed. They're getting gassed. So his schemes favored the defensive back. They pushed those guys back, right? This year, the Bengals got a new coach. His name's Al Golden. He's coming from Notre Dame. He's running a 4-3. So that's good news for our linebackers. So keep an eye on him. It's another guy to follow. 4-3. Bengals, that's going to open up that second linebacker spot. So I think, and I'm calling our shot, we're talking to all the top rookies here, we're talking about the hunters here. Look for Demetrius Knight. Look for him as that second linebacker come on the field. Demetrius Knight, I went down to the Senior Bowl. I watched him in person. He was throwing offensive linemen around like they were cowards. He was just all over the place. And he's a great coverage guy, too. His PFF grade is 82.5. Logan Wilson, the lead dog, is only 72.4. So that's a coaching scheme I'm interested in. That's a positive. Now, if we were to talk negatives, I'm going to talk about Lou again. Lou's going to the Colts. What does he do? He puts all those guys in coverage. What else does he do? He runs 3 safeties, puts them all out. That's bad news for Cam Bynum that just got there. And I know we like Nick Cross. I don't know how these guys play. I don't have the Johnny Carson crystal ball. I don't have the, I wish I did, but I don't. If that happens, and Nick Cross gets played like, Nick Cross is our tackle guy. Nick Cross, he had 146 tackles last year, kudos to him, but he had 56 the year before. His coverage skills aren't good. We all know this, 64.3. That ranked 58 last year amongst defensive backs. So if that scheme plays out, context matters. These guys can be shifted around. Now again, we say that these are trends. We're not going to know until the first couple weeks of the season. The first couple weeks of the season, the defense is ahead of the offense. That's when we get our little tells. That's why it's important in IDP to lift the heavy weights, check the snap counts, check the efficiency of the pass rush. But those are 2, that was a good question. Those are the 2 players that I look at.
To piggyback off that slightly, there are 2 teams that do something very unique that other teams do not do, for the most part, in the NFL, and that is the Minnesota Vikings and the Los Angeles Rams, where they actually emphasize one major linebacker on the field the majority of snaps. They're LB2. You know, we're talking like a 60-40 split here. Like it's really one linebacker you want for these guys. So like Blake Cashman for the Vikings, he's somebody that you definitely want to invest in because you know he's going to be on the field more often than not. The battle for the LB1 spot in Los Angeles, that's one that I'm paying very close attention to as we're getting closer. We're assuming the free agent Nate Landon coming over is going to take over, but he's dealing with an injury right now. But if he ends up being healthy, I don't think you bring him over in free agency not to have him be your LB1. So somebody to pay attention to there. But again, it's very, very unique, those 2 situations there. Like you go back for the Rams, Ernest Jones was successful there, Bobby Wagner was successful there, Rosenboom was successful there last year. Yeah, thank you. Well, per PFF, again, take PFF metrics however you want to take them. Not great in coverage, not great at, doing a lot of things on the real football field. But for fantasy, we don't care about that. We care about opportunity. And I think that kind of is something that we have to pay attention to is, talent versus, snap counts. Like, what do you kind of go for when you're looking for your IDPs? Obviously you want to get the elite people, the people who are ranking at the top of your lists here, but then when you try to fill out your roster, I don't care if the person is wildly inefficient at pressure the quarterback. I don't care if they're wildly inefficient and have a high missed tackle rate at linebacker. If nobody's coming to make their job, that's their job, and their job is going to be, I don't care if they have a 15% missed tackle rate. If they're giving me 120 plus tackles a year, like, and I know nobody's going to be coming to do like that's okay, you know. Now, if there is some competition for that job, that's a situation that I'm kind of avoiding for the most part.
So, going off of AJ's question, you guys gave me all the positive ones. As a Bears and Jets fan, like, on offense, if you see Shane Waldron as the OC, you're avoiding them. If Nate Hackett is the OC, you're avoiding those players. Is there a D coordinator or two, or a scheme that you guys are, not for me, this is not going to help me, so you will avoid a team?
Yeah, I would love to talk to Nate right here with this question and his fandom with Steve Spagnuolo.
You know, I'll jump in on that. I don't know that there's necessarily anybody that you want to avoid completely, but there are some teams that have a very limited number of IDP value. As far as there's a couple of teams that maybe only have one or two guys that are worth having on your team. There's nobody that absolutely you're going to avoid because of the scheme. But there are a lot of teams that rotate a lot of players, and that's something that will absolutely kill your IDP value, especially at the linebacker position. We've got some teams that the Bills are on. Gregory Rousseau. If this guy played 80% of the snaps, he'd be a top 10 defensive end. But you know, most of the time he winds up playing 65 or 70% of the snaps or less in a given game because they rotate 5 or 6 guys along the front. And there are several teams that do that. The Eagles are one of those that have done that in the past. I don't know that they have the numbers that they used to have of quality players. And a lot of times it depends on that. If they've got 5 or 6 good guys up there, they're going to try to keep everybody involved. You have your teams that only have 5, maybe 4 or 5 guys that are capable of being on the field full time or most of the time, so that their rotation is much smaller. And I don't necessarily know that that is specific to the coordinator as much as it is specific to the personnel that's available to them.
So just to throw that in there are certain coordinators that do certain things. There's certain companies like poker, right? You got to read on somebody. Jaguars defensive coordinator last year. He made a career out of being a defensive lineman group. What happens sometimes? We keep winning, our ego gets us. He put, we say Olakuni on the defensive line as an edge. Okay? What happened to his numbers last year? A lot of people are saying, don't draft Olakuni, he's dead. He's dead. Well, he wasn't his box. And so if the tackles guy, he was on the edge. What happened to his tackle efficiency? It dropped. All because the coordinator decided to put him there. Yes, if you're playing on the edge, your offense matters. If you're on the edge, you're not going to make as many clean tackles. You're going to miss some on the inside. So to your point, there are certain coordinators that do certain things. We just got to get a good read on it, and that's where the preseason first couple of games are going to happen.
So we know in Dynasty, we all fall in love with rules. It used to be on offense, it might take a couple like positions, third year tight end break out. When it comes to the IDP defensive side, what rookies are you excited for this year?
So one that I'm excited for is actually, I know Gary's going to love this, defensive back Nick Emerwarny for the Seattle Seahawks. Versatile defensive back out of the University of South Carolina. Can literally play any position as defensive back all over the field. You know, he's playing under Mike McDonald, who helped turn that Ravens secondary a couple seasons ago into one of the best secondaries in football, and helped turn Kyle Hamilton into what I believe is the superstar that he is today. He just needed to have that right role where he was used as that Swiss Army knife that could make plays and get you the tackles, whether he's playing at the box or he's playing in coverage or slot coverage or he's playing everywhere. You know? And so Emerwarny he has that kind of talent. And under the right coaching scheme, I think this year towards the middle of the season and towards the end, you're going to see him get more and more opportunities. And God forbid there's an injury to somebody like a Julian Love. Well, he's going to slide right in there for that box roll. And just, again, the way the linebacker situation is for Seattle, high productivity. Personally, I think there's a lack of consistency from week to week, so therefore they're going to probably need some more help at that linebacker position, so bringing up that box safety, help out on that second level.
I already mentioned Carson's rushing group, who I love in Cleveland. I'm also very interested to see what Jahad Campbell does in Philadelphia. He's got a little edge rusher to him, so I'm curious to see what they have in store so far as his role this year. If only because, again, the Eagles don't have the depth on the edge that they've had in past years. You don't really want him to play the edge from an IDP perspective. We want him to be an off-ball linebacker, but he's an incredibly talented young man. I think he can have a great career.
I completely agree with Gary on that one. If he gets in the right role, he's going to be a beast, but my fear is that because he needs help, we're going to want to kick him outside more often and play a lot of three linebackers with him on the edge. The rookie that I'm really liking right now is Abdul Carter with the Giants. The Giants have a long and heralded reputation for getting after the passer. You go back 2 decades, and they've consistently been among the league leaders in sacks. They've always got, remember back when Michael Strahan and that crew was there, they would put 4 edge rushers on the field across the defensive line, having a tackle and everything, and offenses had no idea what to do with them. That's no longer the case with the defensive coordinator changes or whatever, but that reputation is still there. They still get after the passer. They got rid of Aziz Ojulari, let him go to make room. They do not have a big number of guys in the rotation there. There's going to be probably three players rotating at the defensive end. And I think Carter may wind up being at least the lead sacker among rookies this year, if not one of the most valuable IDPs.
I like Jalen Walker for the Atlanta Falcons. I think he could come in and play immediately. He's also 6'2", 245 pounds, so you got that prototypical build. The NFC South, you got Baker Mayfield, you got Young, and you're going to have whatever the Saints rolling out there. So I think there's potential for him to come in and make an impact, which is pretty rare for rookies. So I would say temper some expectations. Defense has a lot of scheme and like counter-punching, for lack of better words, and that takes a long time to learn. So temper expectations for the rookies. I do think Walker could come in and he's the 15th overall pick for a reason. So they're going to try to plug him and play him almost immediately. And like I said, Atlanta has a good chance to make some noise in the NFC South.
Yeah, I don't think I thought it was low-hanging fruit, but realistically for IDP, it's the unicorn pick, and Travis Hunter. Obviously, depending upon your league score. Kings Classic for the IDP, for instance, yesterday, they drafted Travis Hunter, and me not being in it, I didn't know what the rules were specifically, in that you have to designate him as either wide receiver or defensive back. Now, there's merit to that because you can then have depth. If you lose a receiver, you know you can plug him in without having to scour the waiver wire, and maybe opposite as well as with defensive back. The problem we don't know right now is snap allocation and exactly what he's going to be. But if it's a dual scoring format where he's on the field, you get points, he's an IDP cheat code. For anybody that plays fantasy baseball, Shohei Ohtani is a great example. We go back in previous years for football. I mean, some of us do, some of us aren't old enough to remember. I mean, this panel is clearly old enough to remember. Marcus Colston, when he was tight end eligible. It means exactly what it is. We're unfortunately old, and we remember 10 years ago. You have the Marcus Colston got to play tight end, at least eligible, so he was a wide receiver. Huge benefit for that. But yeah, so Travis Hunter is very intriguing to see just exactly how that plays out.
All right, as we finish up, are there any questions from the audience?
That's just one. You mentioned the New York Giants. With Brian Burns, Dexter Lawrence, Abdul Carter, and Kayvon Thibodeau, is their front seven the IDP gold mine because they're being overshadowed by the mystery that is their offense?
That's a good question, yeah, so it kind of comes down to how things go. One problem about having an offense that doesn't put up a lot of points is your opponent doesn't have to throw a lot. If your opponent doesn't have to throw a lot, you don't have a lot of opportunity to rush the passer. So that could be a limiting factor there. Providing they stay in a lot of games, I think that could wind up being absolutely true, that they could be one of the elite defensive front sevens in the league.
John?
I had a question. I'd like you guys to each answer this question with 2 names. So who do you think will lead, and feel free to repeat, who will lead the league in tackles
I'll start so everyone can copy my answers because, of course, I'm going to be right. Lead the league in tackles. I mean, it's low-hanging fruit. Give me Zaire Franklin in Indianapolis. Lead the league in sacks. I'm a Browns fan. Miles Garrett.
In sacks, I'm going to go. I think you're going to see a return to form with Max Crosby. He was dealing with a knee injury last year, so I'm going to go back to the previous seasons. He was top 5 in pressures. The past 3 seasons before then, double-digit sacks. Like I said, the injury last year really hampered him. One of the things that I think is actually going to free him up is the return of Malcolm Kuntz, who is definitely somebody you should be paying attention to and jotting down and having on your radar when you're doing later-round drafts for the defensive lineman. He's somebody who's going to, I believe, free up Max Crosby to do even more damage, which is crazy to imagine. In terms of tackles, again, and I apologize for the low-hanging fruit here also, but if Zach Bond didn't miss a week last year, he would have been the leader in some of the tackles. So, there's to what John was saying, there's a lot of uncertainty always with the Philadelphia Eagles because they just have so many good players. They just have to cycle, everybody around to stay healthy. But if there's one thing that is certainty, is he is their main off-ball linebacker, and they're going to do a lot of. I'm excited. To give you a number, I have no idea, but it's high.
So tackles, I don't think anybody's not going against Zaire Franklin. He has a billion snaps every year. He's a tackle guy. Sacks is a good question. I think I have a better shot at winning than Walker at this point. But let's look at the schedule. Have you seen the San Francisco 49ers schedule this year? They're playing the Raiders. They're playing the Cardinals. They're playing the Saints. They're going to eat this schedule up. I'm just going through Jaguars. Yes, please, Nick Bosa. Nick Bosa is going to tee off on all these guys. Texans, Giants, you said it, the Rams. I think if I was a betting man, which I'm not, I know you are, John, I'd probably go Nick Bosa. Miles Garrett's your answer too. But yeah, those are the guys. Those elite guys, they're going to tee off on their schedule.
All right, for the sacks, providing he is healthy enough, which I think he will be, I'm going to go with Aiden Hutchinson from Detroit. This is a guy that had 7.5 sacks through the first 4+ games last year when he got hurt. I think if he would come back anywhere near what he was, I think he is ready to break out. As far as the tackles go, we could go with the low-hanging fruit with Zaire Franklin or Zach Vaughn or even Jamie Sherwood. But I'm going to throw another name out there that I think is going to be in contention this year is Jordan Brooks. When he was in Seattle, he was an absolute tackling machine. He tackled everything, including the water boy. He was hurt. I don't know why Seattle gave up on him as quickly as they did. I mean, he came back less than a year after a major injury and played. He wasn't quite the same player, so they let him go. He goes to Miami and instantly becomes the same player that he was when he was a rookie in Seattle, putting up those numbers again. So I would not be at all surprised to see him emerge again this year.
Going back to coaching for me, Robert Saleh went back to San Francisco. Fred Warner's there. They lost I think 5 or 6 defensive starters. I can't remember off the top of my head, but Fred Warner's still there, and I think they're going to have some trouble stopping teams. And he's a true sideline linebacker. So I think Fred Warner has a really good potential to lead the league in tackles. And then here's an interesting thing: Trey Hendrickson, Myles Garrett, T.J. Watt. These Kyle Van Noy had a lot of sacks. The AFC North is loaded with people that bring pressure because of how the division's built. So I think T.J. Watt just got paid. You've got Joe Burrow likes to hold on to the ball, make a play. Lamar Jackson likes to hold on to the ball, make a play. Aaron Rodgers is probably going to not do that as much, but that's on his team. And then Joe Flacco's either old or Sugar Sanders is young. So there's going to be some potential there for Cleveland sacks as well. So for the AFC North, you think of it as being like ground and pound and running and defense. Really, it's a great quarterback league with quarterbacks that like to hold on to the ball. And it's about 3 of the top 4 people that led the league in sacks last year were in the AFC North. So give me T.J. Watt.
Yeah, I would mention Zach Vaughn as being a good option because, one, the Eagles are going to go 0-17 on the season, the worst team in the NFL. Eagles suck. And so they'll constantly be facing heavy rushing attacks, implementing him as the tackle leader, which tongue-in-cheek, great game. But pandering to the crowd, of course, Houston Texans, I mentioned earlier, Will Anderson. I do believe that if you're looking for a person who I might not feel guaranteed, but if I'm going to make a side bet with some good odds, or betting's allowed, of course, sorry. Danielle Hunter has Will Anderson has a very good chance to be in that mix for someone that could pay pretty good dividends.
All right, so as we finish this up, I'm going to ask the Prime Father to come down here for a minute. Normally every year, we do a little raffle for a prize. Sometimes when you have to spend 2 hours dressing in the morning, you forget the ticket. But as we value rookies, we would like to give this autograph to Jared Allen Poster to our rookie here.
So do you know who Jared Allen is?
Now,
Do you know what a mullet is? Okay, so look for the guy that's in the Hall of Fame class that's wearing a mullet. You've got his autograph.
I want to say that the Hall of Fame classes, you're perfect examples of big play guys. Allen and Allen, interceptions, sacks, right? So, know your personnel. Let's go trust me.
all right, thank you all for coming and play IDP.